Hello, welcome to today's session. In today's session, we are going to see how to do one-to-many mapping between the entities using JPA. So already we have seen how to do one-to-one mapping using JPA in the previous session. And in one session, we saw what is JPA, how the entity calls are automatically converted into database calls using this JPA. Okay, so I have given the link of all those videos in the description box. You can go through that video if you have not listened to that. Now in today's session, we are going to create two entities. Like we are going to create an employee entity and we are going to create a department entity. So you can see there are more than one employee works in the same department. Okay. So now suppose I want to store the reference of employee entity on the department side. Okay, so here in the department table, I want to store the reference of the employee in the department side. In that case, I have to store it as a list, because in every department, you will have list of employees working in that department. Suppose if you store this department ID in the employee side, so here you can see you have department ID as a foreign key. So there is no need for list, because an employee will work only in one department. Okay, so here there is no need for list if you store the department ID in the employee side. But if you store the employee ID in the department side, then you have to create a list of employees working in the department side. Okay, so we are going to do this using one-to-many mapping. So let's directly go into the project and create two entity and create one-to-many mapping. So let me create a new project. Here I'm going to create a Java application, because we are not going to create any web page, so it will be a Java application. And let me give the name as one-to-many. Okay. Now let me go to the services inside Derby database. I will create a new database. Let me call the database name as one-to-many. Okay, the username will be app, password will be same app. Okay, so once when you give create, you can see the link for the database appears here. So you can see the link here. Now I can give connect and check the tables. There is no tables inside. Okay, now we are going to the project and we are going to create the two entities. So let me right click here and new. I have to create the entity class. If you don't find the entity class here, go to other. In persistence, you will find the entity class. Okay, so let me create the employee entity first. Employee entity, I have to give the package name where I want to create the entities. So I'll give the package name as entities. Click next. It's asking me what should be your persistent unit name. So let me give a unit name Hema. Okay, and you have to select which is a database connection. So the database connection is one-to-many, and here you have to select create. Okay, now click on finish. You can see the entity is created. The name of the entity is employee. So here if you see, by default it has one attribute ID, which is a primary key because it has the annotation at ID. Okay, and the primary key is auto generated, so you need not give any value for the primary key. Okay, the next attribute we want to create is private string name of the employee. Okay, then private string, I want to create private int. I'll create the age of the employee, then I'll create the phone number. Okay, that's it. Okay, now these are all private, so we have to include get and set method. So right click, insert code, getter and setter, select all and click generate. Okay, so that's all we done with the employee entity. Just save it. Now we are going to create the next entity. Click on the project, right click, new entity class, create the next entity. The next entity is department. Okay, package name, same package, entities. Okay, click on finish. So here you can see the department entity is created. By default, you have an attribute ID, which is again the primary key. So this is your department ID. The next attribute I want to create is the name of the department. So let me create the name of the department, dname. Okay. The next thing will be, so on the department table, I'm going to store the list of employees. So I will be creating a list. Okay, so let me create a list, private list. Okay, what is the data type of list is, you're going to store the employees. Okay, the list name is employees. Okay, so let me click and add the import for list. Now here I have to write what is a relationship. Okay, how I'm going to connect with the employee. So I have to write the relationship is one to many. Okay, now click and add the import for this one. Okay, now we finished declaring everything. Now what we have to do is we have to insert code for getter and setter. So insert code, getter and setter for dname and the employee list. Okay, so this is done. Now save it. So we finished creating two entities. The next thing we have to do is we have to create the main program where we have to create the binding between two entities. Okay, so now right click, new. I have to create a Java class. The name of the class I'm going to give is main. Okay, the package I'm going to use, let me give any package name. I will call the package name as bind. Okay, click finish. Now this is your main program. First let's write the main function. To finish writing the main function. Now here the first and foremost thing that is required is we need entity manager factory, and then we need entity manager. Okay, entity entity manager factory, EMF, if you declare EMF, and entity manager, EM. Now click and add the import for entity manager factory and entity manager. Okay, now you have to create the entity manager factory. Persistence dot, you have a method create entity manager factory. You have to give your persistent unit name. Remember, when we create the first entity, it asked for the persistent unit name. We gave the name as Hema. Okay, next you have to get the handle for entity manager. EMF dot, you have a method called as create entity manager. Okay, now entity manager is a central piece of JPA. If you want to save an object permanently in the database using entity manager only, you have to call a method called as persistent. So you can save, you can update, you can remove an entity. Okay, you have all the methods in the entity manager to do that. Okay, so now we will begin the transaction. Begin. Okay, now let me create an employee instance. Okay, so here how many employee instance we will be creating? More, because more employees will be working in one department. So let me create 2 or 3 employee entities. So employee E1 equal to new employee. Okay, I'm creating an empty object. Now this employee is in different package, so I have to import. So here you can see import entities.employee. So import that entity. Okay, now to assign the values, you can call set method. So you can, for ID, you need not set the value because it is auto generated. So you have to set the name. So let me give the name as Asma for the first employee. E1 dot set age. Okay, E1 dot set phone number. Okay, some number. So this is the first employee. Like that, you have to create 2-3 employees. Let me create the second object. I have to use the same method to set the values, but I have to use E2. The name of the object is E2. Okay, so let me write another name here. Similarly, I will create one more object, employee object. I'll call it as E3. Okay, fine. Now we have to create a array list for employee and put all these objects inside the array list. Okay, so let me create the array list for employee. So let me create the array list. Okay, let the list name be EMP list. Okay, the type of array list is, you have to write the name of the class. Okay, now click and add the import for array list. Now we created the array list. Just I'm going to add these objects into the array list. EMP list dot add. So I'm going to add E1, EMP list dot add. I'm going to add E2, EMP list dot add. I'm going to add E3. So finish adding. Now we have to create an object for the department entity. D1 equal to new department. Okay, you have to click and add the import for this entity because this entity is in different package. I think there is some spelling mistake. Okay, because the import is not recognized, so let me write the import by myself. So here I will write import entities dot department. Okay, yes. Now let me assign the value for this object. Set department name. Department name is IT. Okay, now I'm going to set the employee list. Okay, you have set employees. Here I'm going to give the array list name. Okay, then I'm going to save these objects permanently. So for that I have to use entity manager dot persist method. Persist. So what I'm going to persist? I'm going to persist my okay, let me persist this one, emp dot persist. I'm going to persist the department D1, and then I'm going to close the connection dot close. Just save this and then you can run your program. So before you run your program, you have to attach the Derby the client driver client for the Derby database. So you can go to Marvin repository. Okay, so here you can go to Marvin repository. There you can search for Apache Derby client JDBC driver 10.10.1.1. So here you can see the dependency. Just copy this dependency. Okay, and then go to your project folder. In project folder you have pom.xml file. So here just paste the dependency. Okay, just paste the dependency here and save it. Once you save it, you can see the driver will get downloaded and attached to the project folder. So once this is done, now you can execute. This is your main program. Okay, select main class. Your program will execute. Okay, there is an error here. So let me check what is the error. Okay, just a small change. We forgot to add commit statement after we persist. Now, instead of storing the employee list, I have stored individual employees, employee E1, E2, E3. Okay, so I've called persist and stored the individual objects of all the employee, and I also have stored the department object. Okay, so we got some error while execution. So I just saved all these objects separately, and then we have to give commit at the end. So here we have begin transaction. So here you have a begin transaction, and finally when you're going to close, you have to give commit. So now which is just I will run this program. So there is no error. Now we will go and look at the database. I'll just refresh the database. You can see the tables are created. For each entity, you can see a table is created. Okay, and the third one is the relationship table. The primary key of department and the primary key of employee will be stored in the relationship table. Okay, so let's see the department table. I'll click view data. So this is your department table. You can see IT is inserted. Now let's again go to the table, employee table, right click, view data. You can see the values inserted for the employee. So these are the employee details. So here you can see the employee values are inserted. Okay. Now let's see the relationship table. So here you can see the primary key of employee and the primary key of department are stored in a separate table. So in one-to-many, okay, you will have for each entity you will have a table, and for relationship also you will have a table. Okay, so this is how one-to-many is implemented. Hope you understood the session. Thank you for listening.